I'd like to call to order Dauphin County Board of Commissioners 2026 budget hearings for Wednesday, November 5th. I want to begin by allowing our chief clerk to kind of just set for everybody a little bit of our budget, I guess, broader picture of what we're dealing with going into these budget hearings and just get a sense of kind of level setting prior to going into these individualized budget hearings. So I'll give it to you for a couple minutes.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. For folks here in the room, there are copies of this sheet towards the door there if you didn't already get one. I'll spend a few minutes sort of explaining this budget projection and some context for where we're at. The short story is not good, but we'll get into that. So this document here shows, going back to 2019, just for some perspective, what our general fund balance has been, and then annual revenue and expenses by category. So as an example, if you start in the upper left corner, 2019, we started the year with $37 million in our bank account, collected $169 million in tax revenue and other revenue, spent $171 million that year, which led to a $2 million deficit, and ended the year with $35 million. So that's just generally how to understand this sheet. Is the top number is what you start the year with in the bank. Then the green section is how much money you collect. The red section is how much you spend. And then that tells you the annual deficit or surplus, and then how much money is left in the bank at the end of the year. So you can see here the blue columns are actual numbers from prior years. The yellow column is for this current calendar year, 2025, where you can see that we began the year with $29 million. The budget projected $207 million, almost $208 million in collections, and $222 million in expenses. We are very close to being on the mark in terms of expenses for this year, but have so far collected about $1.3 million in revenue less than we would have anticipated based on previous year's budget projections. So at the end of this year, we anticipate ending the year with a $15.7 million deficit and $13.6 million left in our general fund. So kind of shows you just how challenged this year has been, even after a significant tax increase last year that saw our property tax collections go up from $110 million to $132 million this year. Even after that increase in $22 million in revenue, we still have a $15.7 million deficit for this calendar year. So I'm tried to sort of lay this out not as just a one-year problem, but a three-year problem, given that there are three more budget votes that the board will have to cast through the remainder of this term. So for 2026, based on our projections, we are looking at a $28 million deficit. So we would take in $203 million next year and spend $231 million, which is of course impossible because we only have $13.6 million in the general fund to begin with. So we would project the county running out of money entirely by April or May, most likely, if nothing changes, which of course is not going to be what happens. And that's why we have these hearings to determine what we're going to do about this situation. So a $28 million deficit projected for 2026, a $37 million deficit projected for 2027, and a $43 million deficit projected for 2028. Those are the cells highlighted in bright yellow in the bottom right-hand corner of this sheet, which leads to a cumulative total deficit over the remainder of this board's term of nearly $110 million. So $110 million is kind of the magic number that we need to figure out what to do about over the next 3 years. So that is sort of where things stand now. Of course, there are a whole host of difficult choices and options ahead of us, but I hope that sets some context for the decisions and discussions we'll have with each department.
Thank you, Mr. Haggerty. Are there any questions of Mr. Haggerty or clarifications that are needed by the board?
I have a couple, even for level setting.
Sure.
Last year with the I get last year with the increase in taxes. Um, what was the projected revenue that we anticipated? I know you said it came in about $1.3 million less than what we had anticipated. What was the projected revenue that we had anticipated related to that tax increase, and what is it that we actually received?
In terms of property tax collections, it's almost on the money. So we projected $132,465,000 in property tax collections after the tax increase. And so far this year, we are estimating that we're only going to be off by $60,000. So we would collect
32 million.
$132,405,000.
So
The
about 60,000 less.
60,000 less, correct.
And again, when we take a look at year over year, I mean, the actuals and the increases in the amounts have varied over the year because the bottom line has been from 169 to 244 in 2021 post pandemic to 203 related to expenditures to 2025 being at the actual at about 206. So I mean that gives you an idea of how we've tracked for expenditures versus revenue, which is an important piece. And there's always been at least in here, at some level of a structural deficit, particularly where salaries are no longer being compensated for by federal dollars that were here under the CARES Act and ARPA as those salaries increased. And to be competitive, there was a trajectory that was moved without, you know, the replacement of those federal dollars now need to come from some other revenue source because they are no longer there to be able to continue to sustain both the salary trajectory that we're at currently, plus the increases, both contractual um, increases that occur and the increases generally by, you know, at even non-union level officials, if we're looking at it at 2% or 2.95%. So that's really a significant gap. So federal revenues went away. We're in an environment where you've got, you know, to be competitive, you've got to increase salary rates across the board. Quite frankly, without that, we don't remain competitive in 24/7 in other operations. But yet the revenues that were used to be able to support those increase in salaries, at least post-pandemic, were made up in significant federal revenues. Now those, after this year, those revenues will be completely expired. So that's a major contributing factor.
Yes, and additionally, local governments across the Commonwealth who are dependent by statute primarily on the property tax face a difficulty, which is that unlike the sales tax or income tax, which increase over time along with inflation, in the absence of any reassessment, property tax collections remain flat. So that's just sort of an inherent challenge in the way taxation is structured.
Can you tell the public when the last time we had a reassessment was?
I don't
2001,
actually,
I believe.
I don't actually know the answer.
Base year is 2001.
Yeah.
But there's annualized growth. I mean, there's a number of things on the horizon, from the proposed data centers to the tax assessment TMI to a number of other areas that the new Hershey factory. I mean, a number of things related to growth. I think annually the county grows from a real estate tax revenue perspective at about 1% or a little bit under 1%. We're expecting some growth in some of those areas, but again, not keeping up with both employment costs, employee costs, and the cost to do business. And add on to that, federal government shutdown, no state budget, interest earnings, downgrade related to both our bank interest earnings. I mean, as the Fed continues to cut rates, every dollar we make in interest earnings are less of a dollar tax dollars you have to spend. Rates going down being great for borrowing, but it also means less dollars for us to be able to have from a county concentration account and less revenue in that county concentration account. Increase in benefits. I mean, we've never had a chance to talk about all these factors, but they're important, I think, to lay out. And then lastly, one of the areas that we do have a capable, and I think it's moving in the right direction, is the Dauphin County Retirement Fund, which has had decent returns, is almost completely solvent, and we see our ARC moving in the right direction. which is, there's a smoothing that occurs, which so we don't get immediate relief, but those dollars for retirees are going to be secure based upon our current financial condition or situation and the returns. And hopefully our future contributions will be moving down, not up, based upon those returns. But new healthcare, and what we know in the healthcare market is costs are going to get much more expensive, you've seen from the open market and even internally. So factors, some of which are in our control and some are without, but all things that we're battling with related to the budget.
All right, we're now 12 minutes behind, but that's okay.
No,
I feel like we obviously have time slots on here, and we'll do our best to honor those time slots. But we also wanted to make sure for the public that we just kind of took some time to level set as we head into these budget hearings, just so that the conversations that we're aware of and the reality of the circumstance is shared. With that, I do want to say at the end of all of these hearings, for today and for each day through this, we'll have a time for public comment. So if you're here and you're a member of the public and you would like to make comment, there'll be a time for public comment at the very end of each day of budget hearings. With that, we'll start with Tri-County Planning Commission, Andrew Bomberger and team, or whoever you would like to have come with you. Welcome, Andrew.
So
Thank you, commissioners.
just for a quick summary here, their year-end estimate, they're expected to come in 100% on budget as it's a subsidy. Their request for next year is up $4,438 or 1% from 2025. What you see in the binders represents what they requested. There's been no changes made to it.
Sure. So thanks for having us here to present. You would have received a budget request that was just discussed. I'll highlight that the only increase requested is the match required to kind of access the increase in our federal transportation dollars. So that everything else is held even, and that when our federal dollars go up, we have to match that with non-federal dollars. Your allocation of that is what accounts for the entire increase that we're requesting. Everything else is held in line with last year's request. I can cover some highlights. Jerry Duke from our office, our Dauphin County Planning Coordinator, is here as well to answer any questions. I can kind of go down line by line if you'd like.
Can you highlight which line is matched with federal dollars? Are all lines or certain lines matched with federal dollars?
So I think the easiest.
They have that. They have the request.
Okay. So the top line, the regional transportation planning. That's what. So we get funds from each county in the Tri-County region to match against a larger amount of funds that come from other sources, mainly the federal government. So the Dauphin County contribution for 2026 would be just shy of $70,000. I think it gives our total transportation planning budget. I don't think we have we do. Or is it in here?
The total planning funds is 1.2 million.
Yeah.
So my question is, does Cumberland and Perry also provide a share?
Absolutely.
And if their share their share went up in a proportional amount
Yes.
to the county?
Everybody's share goes up the same amount.
Understood. Okay. Well, I'd like to see you at a 0% increase. I mean, not to include our match to the drawdown is not sensible. So I understand the position. If you can look internally to figure out ways to come up with 70,000, we're open to suggestions.
Sure. I mean that would be something that we would have to review. I think because we still do need to access. We need to have non-federal funds in the match amount to get the federal transportation funds.
Saying
So
any
it would be-
creativity to sort of change internal line items and use the county's contribution towards the match, which is required, we would be open to that discussion.
Okay. Sure.
Any questions, Commissioner Priest?
And just to be clear, it's not a $70,000 increase.
No, I completely understand.
Okay.
Yes,
Say,
we're going to meet the
it's a-
obligation.
Yeah, it's a $4,000 increase.
Understood. You go from 439 to 443.
Yes.
Yes.
Got it. I have no more questions. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
And we still have that planning grant that you've submitted for, I guess our comprehensive planning
Yes,
grant.
but we've submitted two grants actually to supplement the Dauphin County Comprehensive Plan, which is legally required to be updated here in the next few years.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now invite the Dauphin County Library System, Ryan McCrory and team.
So while they come up, they're tab 5 in your binder. Their budget projections for 2026 show a $31,112 deficit due to rising staff costs amongst other cost increases. I'll let Ryan expand more on wages here, but you do see their projections and increased costs here in the following pages.
So thank you, commissioners, for having us. Ryan McCrory, Executive Director of Dauphin County Library System, is my board treasurer.
Hi, I'm Sal Fasolari. I'm currently serve as treasurer of the organization.
I don't so.
Thanks for having us.
So this isn't going to be much different than kind of the approach that I took last year, which is we need to see a millage increase for the library tax. We haven't had one for 21 years. You all went 20 years without one and enacted one last year. We did not get a library millage tax increase along with that. We are prepared. When I got here about 18 months ago, we were at $11 an hour starting wage, which is it's harsh. We are prepared at this point to get to $13.50 on January 1st, based on our own revenue increases and our own expense reductions. We are now in a union environment. The union has requested a $15 minimum wage, which we also are in agreement with, but we're going to need help to get there. If you look at the different projections, the difference between $13.50 and $15 is about 350 to 400,000 difference in what we would need. A 20% increase in the millage, which is less than what was done last year for the county, would raise about 936,000 extra a year, and it would cost the average homeowner an extra $1.60 a month. So less than $25 extra a year for the average homeowner in order to get our staff to $15 minimum wage.
Would you repeat that one more time? You said $1.60 a month for the average?
$1.60 a month, which would get us to $15 minimum wage, which is still less than what the county minimum is. But it's what we think we can do, and we'd love to see that option for you. I've presented in your packet 3 different options for increase. We're just asking for the minimum increase that would allow us to spend those extra tax dollars specifically on increases for our workers. This isn't just a hat in hand, we want more money. This is a very pointed ask that if we get this, we can increase the wages of our staff. We also know, and this isn't indicated in the budget because I just found this out literally an hour before I got here, we're looking at about 23% increase in insurance costs. We've looked at self-funding as a way of moving that. We've looked at moving to group cost because we're currently on an individual ICRA plan.
Mm-hmm.
If we move from individual to group or individual to self-funded, we will save some of that. So what is indicated on your sheet was a 22.5% increase. It's probably going to be only about a 15% increase. So again, we've addressed a number of these issues every different way that we can. The one thing that we need is just an increase in the millage. And I know that's a hard ask given the political climate, but after 21 years, it's that or finding a supplement that will get us $350,000 to $400,000 extra a year for the next 3 years, with the understanding that at some point we can't keep kicking this can down the road. We've got to address it. Supplements only go so far. At some point, we need some structural changes.
Am I recollecting correctly? Last year, when you brought this to our attention, you had mentioned the potential other side of the coin if we don't eventually raise this, kind of even being the potential of having to consider restructuring the library system and what we can afford to continue to keep open and such. Given, I'm not trying to paint a dire picture, but obviously we're all dealing with the challenges. I want us to have a clear picture of what the outcomes of denying this request could be in a couple years, or could be. I just want to know what you're seeing from a projection standpoint, given that workers in all cases need to be paid an adequate wage, and so I'm just more curious about what your thoughts are on that.
Well, yeah. So as I said last year, and it got some kerfuffle because I just named some examples. They were not anything that had actually been discussed. I brought out 2 examples that said even if we closed 2 branches, it would save us about $500,000. If you look at those numbers, 500,000 still doesn't get us to where we need to be.
Mm-hmm.
There was never a discussion about closing any specific branches.
Yes.
It was just an example of even if we do that, we're not getting there. So closing branches is never on the table for us in an honest perspective, because we believe that every neighborhood that has a library deserves to keep that library. And we believe that free and equitable access to information is extremely important. So we're never going to try to remove that. But that's the reality. Also, I shared this with Eric. I hope you guys get it. There was an infographic. We did some polling over the last year. 93% of the public feels welcome and believes that their library is a trusted source of information. 96% of the public believes that libraries are still relevant in this day and age. And 91% of them believe that public libraries should be funded with public tax dollars. I dare you to ask of any other institution that gets 90% approval ratings across the board right now. So the reason I share that is the other fact on there is that 74% of them want to see their libraries to have more digital resources. Digital resources cost us more dollars, even though it doesn't make sense that ebooks should cost 6 times the cost of a paper book, but that's the reality. So if we continue to do what we are doing for our public, the cost is just going to go up, and we can either provide less resources for our communities, or we can not pay our staff a living wage. And I don't think that's the right option.
Can I ask one other question about library utilization? Obviously, given COVID, a lot of spaces like libraries were, not utilized as much. Obviously, community spaces were challenged in that. Have you seen a return to utilization pre-COVID numbers, or do you have any data to kind of show that your libraries are being utilized at a similar rate to what they were pre-COVID, or that they're continuing to grow or anything like that?
We are continuing to see an increase, obviously, in ebook use. We continue to see actually an increase in reference questions, which is something that had been on the decline for probably 20 years. But as more and more people realize that just Googling things is not getting you the accurate information, we're seeing more calls into the library for that. And we are seeing a return to PC use, because even though a lot of people found other ways of accessing things during the COVID years, with the shutdown of federal government and making everything online where you have to do it virtually rather than actually go into an office, we're seeing more people having to come in and use public PCs to access Social Security, unemployment, all of those. So yeah, we are seeing a return to people coming into the buildings.
Commissioner Hartwick, Commissioner Priest, anything?
guess my request would be, could you start providing us with a list of how many folks attend each branch on a monthly basis or yearly basis? I know in the past, when I would give the state of county address when I had oversight, I would always bring up you had hundreds of thousands of visitors to your branches, and people had checked out over 1 million items. I remember when that number reached 1 million, it was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
So I don't know where you're at in terms of how much is being checked.
It's around 900,000. It hasn't actually, the physical use has not gotten back up to what it was before. But if you account for both physical and electronic, we have surpassed where we were 4 years ago. We see about 21 people per event that we offer, and that has actually improved. It used to be 15 to 16 people would show up per event. We see about 42,000 people show up for events over the course of the year. And those are story times. They are people learning how to have a home garden so that they can grow their own herbs. It is learning how to recycle. It is financial planning. So we do a number of events across the spectrum. We are the only institution that serves people from birth until death. K through 12 serves a small segment. Pre-K, a small segment. Senior, a small segment. We serve everyone from birth until death. And so we have to offer programs across the spectrum for that. And we're seeing increased attendance from 15 to 16 per event to 21.8 per event.
Have you had any conversations lately with Middletown or Derrick Township about consolidating any? Or are they still doing their own thing?
They're still doing their own thing. I will say, when I look at the numbers, even if we were to absorb them, I think the cost of taking on that branch would be more than what we would gain in tax dollars. Don't quote me on that. Anyone, please don't quote me on that. But from what I've seen, it would be at a cost loss for us. Doesn't mean it's not something that we would look at if we thought it would do better for the community across the whole. But I think at this point, that's probably not a cost savings for us.
And I constantly hear good things about the programs that you're offering at your branches. Could you just let me, as one commissioner, know for the board, which two branches are the most highly utilized by visitors?
So East Shore is our busiest branch, without a doubt. After that,
And the exact location of the East Shore is?
Colonial Park on Ethel Street. Yeah. I always say East Shore. I think a lot of people still think of it as Colonial Park, but that being a relative newcomer here,
It's okay. You're
I
okay.
call it
You're
East
politically
Shore.
correct.
So, but no, after that, it really depends. So Alexander Family Library, which is in Hummelstown, gets a lot of young family use. McCormick Riverfront, our flagship down on Walnut, we see a lot of people coming in to use the computers, right? So it really depends on which branch you're talking about in terms of what people are coming in to use it for. But East Shore is by far the most attended. After that, I would say Alexander Family Library is going to be the next one. And then we've seen a resurgence in the Love Library on 29th, which has been really great. So again, we are seeing people coming back, and we're seeing a resurgence in library use across the board. So I'm not gonna call out any single library as being better than.
And one last question.
Yeah.
Maybe you can't answer this, but have you heard anything from the state in terms of what your budget might look like for next year? Because you've literally been flatlined for ages.
It is expected to be flatline again. Honestly, at this point, whether flatline or not, I would just like to see them pass it so that we could actually get the funds. Because at this point, as long as we're into this,
You're losing money.
it's probably going to be February before we see those state dollars that we would have typically seen in August. So, anything?
First of all, to the board of the library, thank you for your service. To the employees, thank you for your sacrifice. I happen to believe that the libraries will be dependent upon more as times get worse. and I don't see time getting a whole lot better in the very near future. It's proven that as an economic challenges exist and those hardships exist, that people will turn to the free resource and the library resources as a place to be able to continue to try to find job opportunities, access to the internet, the ability for them to find resources and connect to opportunities even more. And again, my prediction is we're losing SNAP benefits. I don't think people are going to, I don't see things getting immediately better related to individuals' economy. Here's my proposition. First, I want to say thank you. Also, as a human service partner, I know my recent point in time study that we did related to homeless issues, there were the one library had nothing but engagement with the homeless population, and we're providing a level of oversight and engagement. I know you've helped with drug and alcohol and trying to be a naloxone carrier because of the overdoses that have happened in your bathroom. I know there are people that are trained and specifically equipped to provide referral sources. So those kind of partnerships in times of crisis are extremely important as well. And I do believe while there have been supplemental opportunities and there's been investment from this board, so it's not like there's not been significant investment over the course of time. I just want to make sure that that record is clear. If you're looking for sustainable revenue, there is an option. There's an option of a referendum. And if you're talking about 90% approval rating, folks believe it is publicly a really important thing, which I happen to share the view that I think it's going to have more of a public reliance. The idea of a public referendum, I'll join the cause. To put that on the ballot and have individuals from this community make that determination, not only based upon the polling, but also put it back with their own financial involvement, is something that I think is a viable option from where I sit as one commissioner, and one that could be met with support, and we would not be in this situation in at least next year, even though you have significant challenges ahead of you. That is one area where I think, based upon everything I'm hearing, based upon the need and the utilization, that could be one avenue for you related to the raising of at least annualized revenue that are going to maintain the salaries at the levels in which is not even livable but workable.
Thank you.
And another thing that shocks me
Oh, go ahead.
is I mentioned how you're getting flatlined probably again. There isn't one single person from the governor to a state representative to a state senator and their staff that has not benefited growing up over the years from our libraries. And it's almost like they forgot where they learned a lot of their information. And now here they are years later with an opportunity to help and give back. And it's almost like it's an afterthought every year.
Shout out, given that SNAP benefits are going away, Northern Dauphin has a community garden up there, and we grow food, and it goes to the community pantry, and we're starting one at Hummelstown as well. So anyway.
So could I ask, what is the process if the library would seek out a referendum to be on the ballot? Are you aware, Mr. Haggerty, and could you sort of describe what that process would look like?
Yeah, I can certainly connect with Chris Spackman, our elections and registrations director, to confirm for everyone each step of the way.
So I think that is a very viable option.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Extension Service. Ann Miller. Hand it over to Mr. Davis for update.
It's going to be tab 6 in your binders. This department has no revenue associated with it. For expenses, we're estimating them to be $591 under budget for 2025. For 2026, their request comes in with an increase of $19,685, or 3.96%. There's no new positions, merit increases, or items requested. The increase in computer software is due to Oracle and Microsoft that is just required for them to submit invoices and access all the county material. So I will say they really have no control over that. And their organizations line is the biggest increase, but that is where everything that they request basically gets charged to. So
Thank you. So I'm Annie Miller with Penn State Extension. We run your Master Gardener program, your 4-H program. You also have leverage services in terms of agricultural benefits. So we have an agronomist on staff. We have 2 SNAP educators currently and an FNET person, which is the state equivalent of that funding. We hope to be able to maintain those services through 2026 through at the university level. And you also have an ag urban educator that's been working extensively just in Harrisburg for extension services. So I don't know what else you'd like me to cover.
What of the funds that we provide are matched by other grants, or what is reliant on funding for matching purposes in your particular budget, or is there?
Yeah, we don't have like a matching scenario at extension. So it's kind of like leverage services. So we take an assessment of what the community might need, and we placed an urban ag educator exclusively for Harrisburg. You also have poultry educators that service the area and agronomy. So we kind of just take a look broadly. There isn't any, I would say, a set funding match.
Sure. Do you have funding streams from anything other than the county?
Well, so this is mostly salary for your Master Gardener and your 4-H program and some administrative support. They earn all the fundings for any programming that they do. We also partner with the park services, and we actually produce revenue through some of our workshops for Dauphin County. It's not a lot, but a little bit.
Question.
I think in the beginning when we set out for all of these budgets, we were looking for minimally sort of 0% increases, and I know there are costs that are extraordinarily challenging, out of your control. Actually, we had this discussion and talked about a 20% cut across all departments in order to try to beat this, along with some additional revenue enhancements and ways to restructure. I mean, if we would fund you flatly, do you believe you could make the revenue and the projections work?
For flat funding for 2025?
Yes,
based
meaning
on 2025?
And I'm going to ask everybody this question.
Yep.
It's not just a you question. This is going to be an everybody question.
We'd probably buy some less paper clips and things like that. So do what we can.
Understood. And the only other thing I need to say, I planned on being there at the 4-H event on Friday night, but my son has made the second round of the playoffs in football. So Friday night, unfortunately, if any of the other commissioners would want to head to the 4-H, and I know the kids have worked their butts off on this, and I know that they appreciate the Board of Commissioners being there, but I'm going to be in West York in the freezing cold watching my son compete for playoff victory. So my apologies, and I just want
That's
to tell
okay.
you that
We'll
in
get you
advance.
another time.
Yep.
I believe I was there last year. I'm not able to go this year with a conflict, but I'm a nine-year 4-H'er, so missed 10 years by 1 year, but big fan of 4-H and love hanging out with those kids. But
We have you still on the docket.
are you going Friday?
You RSVP. You may not know that you RSVP.
I did. Are you saying I RSVP'd? I was gonna say I think.
Commissioner Priest did.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So.
All right. Any other comments about extension before we move forward? Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Treasurer Nick DeFrancesco.
Thank you, Mrs. Miller.
Treasurer is going to be tab 7 in your binders. For revenue for 2025, we're estimating 85,500 over budget. For expenses, we're estimating approximately 17,000 under budget, or 4.83%. Revenue for 2026, we're as presented, is a $96,000 increase, or 86.5%. For the expenses, it's an increase of 14,000, or 4%. Requested was merit increases for the 3 full-time staff of 50 cents each. You can see that total cost, including FICA taxes, would be $3,359. They are currently reviewing fee structure for certifications and duplicate bill fees, and working to update, increase those fees as allowed by law. Any increases as a result of that are not in this budget, as that would all need to be passed by the individual municipalities. The large increase to computer software is due to upgrading the QuickBooks license as requested by IT. And one other note, that the contracted services line was zeroed out, as we had talked about removing the audit support, but in my overzealousness, that also included the $7,600 for their solicitor, so that will get put back in there.
So what will that make the ultimate request. Give me the final numbers on the request for the 26 budget.
That would just make the 26 request for expenses $380,110.
Which would add, that would mean an increase of about what, 22 and some change.
Yeah, 1476.30 plus 70. Well, if my calculator was not in.
Well, I'm looking at a job, you and your staff, and the work you're doing to go after the, years in payment, so keep up the great work.
Appreciate it. Wish
I
that
know
was
you brought
having
in-
a greater impact on the bottom line of the county, but it's good to be catching up.
Well, you did have an impact on the bottom line of the county of $102,775 related to what was actually your expenditures and your revenues from last year. You've helped, as so has the Register of Wills, in increased revenue projections for this year, which is an increase of almost $100,000. So both to the net positive as well.
Yeah, we it's been too long since we've addressed the rates that we charge in the office for the services that we provide, and we've actually fallen behind even the tax collectors out in the community on some of those fees. So it's definitely appropriate that we would increase them at this time.
Just for numbers, so the total increase for the expenses would be $22,363 or 6.25%.
Treasurer, Chris alluded to this, but could you explain exactly how that process works for those increases?
Sure. So we were waiting for the election to take place, so we knew what we were dealing with out in the communities, who would have tax collectors, who wouldn't. But as we set our rates and basically announced to everybody what we plan to charge for things like tax certifications and duplicate bill fees and things of that nature, the communities are going to have to pass their fee ordinances as well, in addition to what you'll have to do. It's time for us to go out and reestablish the agreements with all the communities that we'll be collecting for. So that's another thing that will be an action that has to be taken by the board, approval of those agreements. But we're going to have to go out and also just sort of do a survey to say, do you want to keep going with us? Are there other communities out there that where no tax collector ran? They might want to pick us up. And the increase in those fees also will help offset the actual costs. We've beefed up in manpower to cover those tax periods. So, and that cost so far, really, I would say, hasn't been passed along to anybody. So this will be, and of course, the cert fees and so forth are more or less line items on real estate transactions and things like that. So not that I would ever belittle increasing costs, but they tend to be a small number on a much larger number sheet. And of course, the duplicate bill fees and so forth are mostly impacting the mortgage companies and things like that that are escrowing, they're providing escrow services.
I wish the legislature would change for the ability to provide a uniform tax collection system, because then you've got challenging tax collectors that continue to not be as efficient or responsible as or provide the kind of customer service that we anticipate. Absent those suggestions, who do you see as potential pickups based upon the election?
And again, I won't know that. I won't know that till we go out to them. We picked a couple up this year. Middletown, for instance, there was a retirement. We picked them up, but they had an election, and my understanding was there was going to be somebody elected, and they were going to use them. So I can't tell you exactly if all the communities will come back or not.
I'm willing to go with you on tour to talk to the municipalities, because I think there's a lot of efficiencies and opportunities to do it without additional expenses for those local taxing.
Excellent. I'm willing to go with you to the state legislature to find
we can make it
modernized system that makes a lot more sense in the modern age. And I would argue the same with the sale of dog licenses and some of the other things. I mean, it was an antiquated system that is literally, I would say, alive only because of historic reasons. It just hasn't been addressed.
Tax collectors used to have much more political authority, and no one wanted to take it on, but it is just a disjointed, very inefficient, and terrible mechanism by which to collect an archaic tax.
And when you think about it, in most of the cases, the liability that comes with the job for the individual far outweighs
Benefit of
the benefit of what they're going to receive. Now, some communities, no, they're gonna profit well, but in a lot of the communities, I would say that the income doesn't even offset the risk.
Any other questions?
Let's take a show.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Treasurer.
Commissioners.
I've got to get a mic that I can hold, I think. You say
Next
it.
up, Register of Wills, Gene King.
It's going to be tab 8 in your binder here. Revenue projections for
Good afternoon.
2025.
Good afternoon.
We're estimating $110,500 over in revenue. Expenses, we're estimating $5,333 over. 2026, we're seeing an increase of $404,286 in revenue. Expenses of $166,313 or 14.81%. As far as a merit increase, the Wills office is requesting to reclass their first deputy into a chief deputy with a salary increase of be $10,000 in salary. With payroll taxes, it's $10,765. No new positions or no new items were requested. Their solicitor position, you'll see on the salary sheet, was abolished. You won't see it. It's in 2023, and they're paid under contract. The $10,000 merit increase listed above to reclassify the deputy position has increased responsibility with automation and computerization efforts in the office. So that would qualify that $10,000 to be paid using restricted funds that she has set aside this year and in future years. The large increase you see in the restricted fund use is the launch of the cloud search software that allows users to access all the documents online. And the fee increase, what you see in revenue, they're expected to increase a minimum of 20% for 2026, which is the cause of that increase. Could be higher, but it has to be approved by the PJ.
Actually, it all needs to be approved. This is all contingent on approval by the PJ. I don't anticipate an issue. But and another thing to note is that our expenses are going down since you requested a hiring freeze of the row offices. We agreed to that. Right before you requested that, we received a notification that our clerk too was resigning to go get a better job at the state. So that'll probably net us another $50,000.
Yeah,
So,
and part of the over budget, this will be a theme in a lot of departments. Indirect costs have just gone up as a whole, higher than we anticipated, so they get charged out to departments. You won't see the revenue associated with that in their budgets. But for instance, what we projected based on where we estimated the 25 numbers, we're coming in 30,000 higher. So even with that increase on paper, it's still minimal as part of the whole indirect cost plan.
You've done a great job, Gene.
thank you.
I mean, $104,233 in net benefit in 2025. And then I know you had to switch in the sort of where you placed the revenue. And I think you've exceeded what we discussed related to in revenue collection. So I've got no questions.
Thank you.
Same.
Thank you. I run my office like a business, and customer service is #1 priority. And I just would like to shout out to my team. They are amazing. We leave politics outside the door, and we want to serve customers with compassion, integrity, and efficiency. And we do that, I think, very well. So I'm very proud of them. I'm very grateful to them. And for the amount of money that they make, I think that we owe them the world.
Thank you.
Personally, thank you. I was reached out to by a county resident a couple weeks ago and passed the information on to you personally. You got back to them yourself within minutes. And I think they were reaching out for another item a week ago for some spelling thing that came from another area, but wanted to see whether you'd be able to help them with that too. So whenever I reach out to you or your staff, you get back to us right away. And the residents, the customer, is the most appreciative.
Absolutely.
So
Well,
thank
thank you. And if you would ever like to come into my office to learn a little bit about what we do a lot. It's a lot of touch points back and forth, but you're welcome anytime.
Thanks, Gene.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Appreciate your support.
Next up, we have Public Safety and Security, Jeff Enders.
We'll start with tab 9. That's their administrative section of their budget. For 2025, we're expecting revenue to be over 166,987. Expenses, we are estimating 46,000 over, or 1.37%. For 2026, their revenue request is up 23,129. Expenses, $281,777, or 8.41%. No new positions or merit increases in this cost center, but we do have $1,000 for miscellaneous equipment that breaks throughout the year that gets used in the field. The overage in salaries and overtime estimates in 2025 is due to a few staff members being sent on deployments to assist with various natural disasters. These costs are partially reimbursed by FEMA or PEMA in their urban search and rescue funds revenue lines. They're currently not eligible for the Act 147 grant, and you'll see that zeroed out. Once TMI reopens, they are eligible to apply and can hopefully begin to receive those funds. The majority of the increase in salaries and benefits in their request is due to the addition of the hazardous materials specialist position. That position is reimbursed by TMI with $92,700 budgeted in their revenue code under private contributions and donations. There is, as I mentioned with Gene, $184,888,000 of the increase in expenses is due to indirect costs and the way that's charged out.
Can you explain to me?
No. Just being honest.
Yeah, well, I've asked these questions already. What makes up your revenue increases for this year? And again, the projections were at 1.8 million. You came in at 2.051 million, which is an increase of 166,000 revenue, which means we might have undershot the budget. There may be an anomaly that I'm not aware of. Tell me what happened, and then you back it back down to $1.9 million related to your revenue projections for this year. So, what happened there?
I can tackle that one. We got 90,000 from Constellation for the reopening of TMI, which wasn't on our radar when the budget was passed, and 57,000 from the FEMA for I believe it was you and Lexi going out on deployments. We haven't historically budgeted for there to be natural disasters.
So you're telling us the overtime's up, but we got reimbursed for a portion.
Yes. Yeah.
Huge portion. Yeah.
So that's just an offsetting expense. Okay.
Yeah. And then the task force remained the same, and that's where the 147 grant, we could still see that in 2026, but that depends on the timeline for TMI to reopen and applying for the grant and whatever windows that would have to happen.
But we're carrying employee, right?
Correct. Yeah, they're
That one's being paid for.
Yeah, they're funding the employee. This Act 147 is in addition to that contribution.
And why are we not expecting any revenue?
Because that we're not eligible to apply for it until they're producing energy.
But what about the Constellation portion?
We
What
got
about the
90 grand,
Constellation portion of the 90 grand? Is that just a one-time shot, or is
No,
that
that's an annual.
And so that's in the budget this year?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
92,700 for 2026.
The Constellation direct payment. The Constellation direct payment is scheduled in the budget, but the ACT money is not.
That's
because
correct.
that's
Yeah.
something we have
Yeah,
to
it's two
apply for
separate.
after the relaunch.
Yes, correct.
But it was in the actuals for the end of the year. So why the
Was
hell?
it?
If you expect to get it, why wouldn't you budget it?
They did get some money, I believe, 47,000. And I forget exactly why that was allowable. I think it had to do with some kind of plan that was created.
Was that emergency planning or something? Money for TMI?
I don't. We'd have to look at that because we shouldn't. We haven't received that grant.
I can pull up the code.
So I'm okay with back it up again. It's not going to make a material difference. I just don't shoot on revenue, at least from a budget perspective where we're talking about every dollar counts.
Yeah, we just did not include the grant because we don't necessarily have an accurate timeline or where TMI would relaunch. Because that has to happen in order to even be able to apply. And depending on when it would relaunch, I don't know if we would even be able to apply for the current year. So there's a lot of ifs in if we could get it for 2026, but once it does relaunch, we would qualify for future
27
funding.
is the
Yeah.
anticipated.
Okay. Any other questions here? Or do we move on to 911?
I just, these guys are in direct power purchase agreements. You know, there's no longer a free ride for the Constellation Energy and Power. So it's not like these are variable costs that are moving forward. And I understand they need to generate revenue first, but you know, they've got to pay their fair share. We're going to have a conversation about tax assessment and putting TMI on the tax rolls versus some pilot payment agreement. They've got casts that should be valued, and they've got a facility that should be valued and placed on the tax roll. We're seeing all that move, and they're playing games already over
Yeah, and we are in
small dollars.
We are in separate conversation about potential other funding.
But here's my
beyond.
concern. Like, there's always these conversations about potential others, and they miss the boat on how much they need to pay in tax revenue. Like, there was a pilot payment agreement that should have, if we were able to have them on the tax rolls over the course of time, those revenues pale in comparison to what that pilot payment agreement would be, and they should pay their fair share. And I don't want any of these side agreements to be construed. And I don't know if I should say this in public. Are we on TV?
Yes, we are.
Are we? Okay. We'll talk about it.
I'll say it in public. I don't want any of these side agreements to compromise the ability for us to tax them. And I'm somebody who just took a tour of TMI. I think it's fine that it's restarting. I'm not against it restarting, but I don't want Dauphin County taxpayers' property tax to cover the potential for an emergency. All the emergency planning should be covered by them on top of the property value, on top of the waste property value. New York State is now taxing waste. We should tax waste too. So as far as I'm concerned, I think whatever conversations we're having about funding for emergency management should have zero impact on our ability to tax the property. And so I'll say it out loud, and I'll say it to anybody who asks, because that's just the reality of the situation.
All of these side agreements, which is my point, should never. All these side agreements, which is my point, should never replace the idea. I mean, I think TMI operates off of, and the past is operated on, here, we'll give you this grant here. We'll give you this grant here. I will take care of this thing here. And all of a sudden, we now think we have some kind of arrangement because we're relying on this revenue, but you're not going to tax us. I don't want us to be in that position. I think you heard from us that we want them to be on the tax rolls. I am fully and completely committed to that occurring. This is not a variable rate energy environment. They're or data warehouses that have direct power purchase agreements that should be able to derive an income, even if you're valuing it based upon the sale and the production of energy. This is a different world in which we're living in. So we want them on the tax rolls. And I just don't want these little piecemeal deals to be a replacement for that.
Could you give us an update on where we're at with the project that you were looking to work with multiple other counties on as part of the bond dollars that we had? There was going to be a project that needed to be done by 2026, 2027. And I think you were looking to get funding from other counties, and I haven't heard anything in a while.
So you're referring to under the 911 side of the budget, that's the CAD project that we're currently getting ready to sparklight, if you will. In January, we should start to have some more solid information. We've been working with PEMA on for a 911 funding grant, and it's for the computer-aided dispatch system, which will save the county taxpayers as much as $3 million the first year alone, with us going into the shared services agreement with us, Cumberland and Franklin, and maybe others. We're not quite sure where it's going to end as far as the group goes.
When is that happening?
We will learn more on the whole project January, February timeline. This is part of that bond money that we have set aside and allocated for our CAD that I've been saying we may not end up needing that fund.
The number set aside is here. The number he said he may need is down here when working with multiple other counties.
Okay, so the 3 million saved would be out of the bond proceeds, not general fund. Got it.
Yeah.
Correct.
But in the end, it would eventually
Safe
come
money
out of the budget.
from
Yeah,
revenue.
yeah, it's going
It's
to
a
come
project
sooner or
that
later.
it's a mandatory. If we don't do it, we have no CAD. So it's one of those where pay me now or pay me later.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we were, if it was going to impact our general fund deficits,
As
that we
years
were
go.
counting money correctly. Thank you.
What $3 million? No.
But we'd eventually have to repay those dollars, so it will be a benefit to us in the long run.
Yes.
Just not a $3 million revenue replacement. What my only other question? We're going to go to 911, right?
Yes.
I'll ask that question there.
So bear with me on this one. 911 revenue as a whole, we're down $1.1 million. Expenses are down. Tab 10, yes. Expenses are down $1.1 million. I'll get you the county share here in a minute. For 2026, the request is in revenue is up 276,000. Expenses are up almost 120,000, or we'll call it 1%. They do have a request for 4 new telecommunicators positions. That would be a total cost of $290,000, $476,000 annually. The request to replace tower site HVAC units, there's 2 of them. The total cost would be $40,000. We have $7,000 in expendable tools just for the small equipment that's used to just maintain the systems. Overtime is estimated at a little over $1 million for 2025 and was budgeted at $500,000. The budget for next year we're currently at $750,000, which is a $250,000 increase. Staff turnover and overtime calculations are part of the reason for the increased salary cost. Staffing during COVID was limited to 8 staff on each shift, which has increased to 10 per shift as staffing is allowed. The large decrease that you see in the computer software line is due to the implementation of 2-factor authentication in 2025, and they won't be incurred in 2026. The large decrease in telephone is due to phone costs not being nearly as high as expected when the county transitioned to Avaya, so that has been greatly reduced. The large decrease in maintenance and service contracts is due to the reduction in annual maintenance for the CAD software by $200,000. Now, as far as revenue, bigger numbers here, or I'll say slightly more important ones. The budget from the general fund was $3.8 million. We're estimating that they're only needing $2.7 million for 2025. And their request for 26 is at 3.7 million, or 41,000 less than 2025.
So you mentioned telephone, which was a $251,000 save. You mentioned maintenance and service contracts. There's several equipment line items that also balancing. We're not going to need those. It's the $110,000 for 803, 802, and you got 807, 400 on the interconnectivity grant, 750,000.
A lot of the equipment rental line, you'll see a corresponding increase in capital leases based on GASB standards and how that has to be shown on our books. So it's not really a reduction. It's just a move to a different area.
So with the telephone fees, I saw legislatively that the House is going to extend these fees at its current $1.95 amount while we're asking for $2.20, but it's going to keep up with the revenues that are going to be required to offset the cost. Does it say yes?
Well, those are the proposals, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's got to be, it's sunsets at the end of the
Yes.
year. So the idea was to try to get an increase, but it appears that the chairman of that committee, Senator Mastriano, is just proposing to move it at a flat rate. But that's not going to cause us problems with any kind of additional revenues.
If
where we're at.
if they keep it steady, the revenue that's shown in here is what that's based off of. So the 6.7 million that we show in is that Act 12 number. If they just keep it steady, that's what we expect to receive. So that should not throw off this budget.
So when I see it next year, it does. We'll have a conversation. You're taking notes, Eric.
They do send out quarterly updates apprising us of where we're at with the 911 funding when they're getting to release it. And there's no anticipated changes in that regards to what we're currently getting. That should maintain that same status. Again, without a doubt, and you three gentlemen all know, I've been way in favor of the $2.20 fee is what it should be. It should be even higher than that, but it's just politics.
Well, it's the number one issue, evidently still the priorities for county commissioners across the Commonwealth. It has a huge impact. These were never supposed to be general fund revenues that were running operation centers for 911.
Yeah.
They should not be sacrificed along with other local services. All right.
All right. Last one's tab 11 for security. For 2025, we're estimating revenue over $95. Expenses, we're estimating under $367,000. Revenue for 2026, we're going to carry over the same $95 increase. Expenses, as requested, is a $76,000 increase or 2.47%. They do have an requested merit increase for 2 full-time staff for the OIC increases, or officer in charge, and 2 full-time staff supervisor pay increases. Total cost would be $27,040. They requested bulletproof vests for the staff at a total of $30,000, and then tasers, cost of $23,300. The increase in the maintenance service contracts is due to increases to the annual cost for the silent receivers in the MDJ's offices and the fire alarm systems. And they're requesting the bulletproof vests as they're currently not issued to any of the security staff. So it would be a one-time expense for everyone.
I know a percentage of your staff is Act 235 certified, so they carry firearms. The tasers, how many people carry them currently?
I want to say 100% of them, but there may be 1 or 2 that maybe do not carry at this time, but all but 100% carry the tasers.
What kind of training do they get for that? I know Act 120, Act 235, what type of training do you get?
So
for
the
that?
Act 235 gets you the sidearm weapon, and it covers all of the use of force continuum. However, that's its own animal. In order to carry the taser, we still require the use of force continuum that you understand, and you have to go to class for that. And there's stuff we do in-house for training as far as the taser certifications that they have to do. I believe it's semi-annual.
Any questions, Commissioner Herbert?
No. You guys flexibility with it, but to move things. So, we'll talk.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the sheriff, Nicomete.
So for 2025, the year-end revenue estimate is over 274,000, approximately. Estimates or expenses are estimated under 665,000. For 2026, their request, their revenue shows an increase of 113,000. Expenses 363,000 or 5.94%. No new positions or merit increases. They did request an Explorer, an Interceptor, an F-150 truck for the K-9, 10 ballistic vests, and 9 mobile computing solution upgrades in the vehicles. Total cost of all of that is $41,180. Increases in overtime and vehicle-related costs are due to the court mandate that the sheriff's office must pick up juveniles for hearing, transport them across the state for trials downtown. This went into effect in January 2025. Transports can be as far as George Junior Republic, located north of Pittsburgh. They're currently exploring how overtime reimbursement from private companies is billed, similar to what is used by the state police, which includes all costs associated with the detail. Instead of billing just straight overtime hours, they include some of the overhead costs, indirect, and some other things. So they're looking into the expansion of reimbursements for these call-outs and requests, as currently they are only reimbursed for the canines, not in the hours or costs associated with other details. The large increase you see in revenue estimated in the deputy cost reimbursement is due to the state having enough funding to release reimbursements that they pay for the trainings. This latest round that we just received for training is from expenses we incurred in 2021. There's no estimated timeline on payments, when payments would resume, or enough funding would be available to cover the remaining invoices that have been submitted since then. The mobile computing solution upgrade requested above has been added to their 2026 gaming grant request. The ballistic vests that are requested are required to replace expiring vests per their collective bargaining agreement.
Current year, the expenses were at $6,026,117. They were under by $664,000.
Sorry, Jessica.
I just said that this year their expenses were down by $664,000. Revenue's up. They're now requesting, an increase in $363,000 in revenue. I mean, in expenses. I'm sorry, keeping you flat. I mean, that's like a significant swing. That's assuming you have a full complement, correct?
And I was going to ask Chris.
Keep them flat funded. That's
George, I can't hear you.
I'm again. I have to get a microphone attached to my cheek.
This office is one in which we've had a particularly hard time filling existing vacancies. And Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, this is one of the 4 units that are currently up for collective bargaining.
Correct.
So can you explain to everyone how and to what extent you are accounting for collective bargaining impacts in the numbers that are presented in front of us?
Yeah, so our current agreements were 4-year agreements. I assumed there was a 5th year of that agreement. So based on whatever happened in the first 4 years, if it was a flat percentage each year, I carried the flat percentage for a 5th year. If that percentage, and I'll just make up numbers for illustration, but if it was like 1% in year 1, 2% in year 2, 3, and then 4, I assumed 5% in year 5. So I just carried whatever trajectory the current CBA had and assumed a 5th year option.
But if we kept the expenditure line item at last year's numbers, I mean, they're $664,000 under budget already.
Yeah, and a lot of that, I mean, as Eric pointed out, it's vacancies. So even with the turnover, even when they hire people, there's a 90-day waiting period for benefits. So depending on the turnover rate, how frequent it is, you could have people that never touch the benefits, which accounts for reductions in that actuals.
And I think that raises a good question, is how we want to budget, right? Do we want to budget assuming that we actually are able to make, headway in filling positions, or do we want to budget based on what we think a realistic projection of our ability to fill some of these positions are?
I mean, when we talk about headway, we also need to be realistic and take a look at trends and what's funded, or are we just going to give additional, budgeted amounts for movement within the budget? So, I mean, I think I prefer to see us be more realistic, and I still think that's $664,000 if we do flat funding over what they spent last year.
Sheriff, I want to thank you for coming in under budget, and also in this particular case, I know we've been dealing with a locker issue over there. You and I've talked a lot about that, and that seems to be getting resolved coming up. Correct?
Yeah, it has.
And so, and to be able to be under budget, get that resolved, and then also the firearms issue. For those that don't know, the firearms and the potential risk with those, and so being able to have new firearms that are not, there's no liability.
Yeah, we
in there.
appreciate your help
And
with that
and
also.
I just say that to say, like, I think you've done a great job of, like, often when those asks are made of us as commissioners, there's not cuts corresponding, or in the sense of like revenue corresponding with those types of asks that maybe was, not anticipated, and the ability for us to, sign off on that was very helpful. So thanks for working with us on that. And other than that, I have no questions.
I know that you were having conversations with some outside entities about potential reimbursement for, if you go to a concert at Hershey Park, you see the sheriffs walking around with their dogs, other special events. Were you successful in any of those
No.
conversations?
Absolutely not. Dave can fill you in on that.
Hershey takes the stand that they take responsibility for anything that occurs within the venue.
Inside the venue.
Inside. Comes to parking lots or anything else, that's out of there. That's Derry Township's responsibility.
So who's asking you to participate in these events then? Is it
Technically, Derry Township requests our assistance. So
So
that's where they fall back on. It's not us requesting your assistance, it's Derry Township.
So do you keep a running tab of how much this is costing your department per year? When you
Not specifically for them.
Well, just a guesstimate, when you do special events, how much you think you're because you're utilizing staff.
Correct.
And a lot of times
all the time.
We
Every time I
typically
pull in that parking lot.
we typically have 2 deputies assigned to probably 75 to 80% of the concerts that they have. Those deputies are not reimbursed. Our K-9 deputies are reimbursed.
You guys do like high school football games too sometimes, or I think I've seen you at some of the other events that aren't just concerts though.
No, we don't do just concerts,
Yeah.
but Hershey has been the only one that has reimbursed anything. They reimburse the K-9 expenses.
When you say Hershey, do you mean Derry Township or
Herco.
Hershey?
No, Herco does the concert reimbursement for the K-9 officers that are there.
Like most recently, we did a DUI checkpoint, and we got reimbursed with that. That was through Lower Paxton Township. We got reimbursed for that. But of course, as you know, we do most of the Dauphin County events that either you guys or someone requests deputies at. But the Hershey events, there's no, and I've said this before, there's no reason why they can't fund that. And I don't.
The parking lot's owned by Hershey Park, isn't it?
Correct.
How does that makes no sense to me.
Because I think Hershey, Derry Township, you might know this more than me. Because
Apparently,
they have an
Derry
amusement tax.
Township, the Derry Township Police,
Funds.
from what I understand, don't know if it's true, but they receive $1 for every car that is parked there. That goes directly to Derry Township Police.
But then Derry Township doesn't reimburse us for.
Correct.
That's another issue.
And we should absolutely unequivocally get reimbursed by Hershey because that's technically part of their curtilage, and they know that. They're drawing all those people there. It's right there on it. Literally, if it's not inside the stadium and it's just outside the stadium, they're saying no, we're not covering.
That's interesting. I mean, we are county's saving Derry Township $500,000 a year because we took over their 911 services, and then the amount that I guess Nick's office, formerly Janice's office, was taking on additional workloads. Interesting.
Can you provide us with stats for maybe just how many hours were spent out there on, if you could get us a rough estimate for this year, how many hours were spent out there that we can share with our Derry Township partners?
I'm going to say we probably work.
You can get it to me later too, and I don't need it
Sure,
now.
I mean, I can get you an accurate number later. I'm just, off the top of my head, we probably work 15 to 20 concerts at 2 deputies each, and they range anywhere from 6 to 10 hours each deputy. So, and that's all.
Not to mention how much we save local law enforcement for having a judicial center.
And we have explored, like Chris had mentioned, I touched base with the state police because right now the way we do overtime reimbursement, it's based solely on the hourly rate of the deputy. And I reached out to the state police because I know they do it differently, and they have a formula that they use that includes benefits, retirement, everything. Which I think I got. I was waiting to hear back from Matt Owens on that, on if we can implement that or not. But it adds 60% to the cost that's being billed.
As it should.
Yeah.
Okay. Make sure Matt gets back to you on that. No, if there's nothing else. Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Next up, tax assessment. Greg Daler.
Layer tab 13 in your binder. For 2025 estimates, we're estimating revenue $772 under budget. Expenses $126,000 approximately under budget. For their 2026 request, it came in revenue came in $43,783 over 2025. Expenses $461,295 under the 2025 request. They are requesting 5 merit increases for staff. They're listed, and they would be abolishing the mobile home administrator position that is currently vacant, which net just on salaries would be a $22,457 savings. We have $600 for replacement of non-inventory items included for things like measuring tapes and other things that will eventually need replaced out in the field. Their contracted services line contains $255,336 for the 2026 pictometry service. The current pictometry contract ends in 2028, and this new current contract keeps the same annual cost each year instead of the up years every other year that the last contract had. $500,000 was originally requested to be transferred to capital projects to be set aside for a future county reassessment reassessment beginning in 2026, but that was removed at their request. The decrease in revenue and their tax assessment fees line is due to 2026 being an off-cycle year for homestead application and a reduction in pro rata reimbursements. Tax sales in 2026 are being held in the jury assembly room in the county courthouse, which saves approximately $5,400 annually in room rentals. The $30,000 reduction in advertising is due to only advertising in the required 3 publications. The optional 4th publication is not going to be used in 2026. The big decrease in consulting services is due to the expiration of the consulting contract with the prior systems analyst post-retirement. The contract was on an as-needed basis with a budgeted cost of $40,000 for 2025 only. As I mentioned, the merit increases requested above would result in a savings of $22,457 in salary costs. You'd also save the associated benefit costs with the abolishment of the mobile home administrator position. Merit increases are requested as a result of the increased workload associated with that position being vacant.
No questions for me?
And the ability to professionalize staff to run your operations at a high level, to keep current capable staff that have been a part of operation, to be prepared for all of the external what you both continue to do. I think budget with the savings and potential revenue opportunities was very thoughtful. So, yeah, I'd love to be able to save money for future issues, but that's been taken out of the past too. So,
no notes for me.
Similar to what I mentioned with Gene, when the residents in the county contact me about stuff involving your office, you're on it right away. I appreciate getting back so quickly, because then let the residents know, and that's how garbage is supposed to work. So appreciate back constituent service.
best collection and assessment staff.
Thank you. I have one question, if I may.
Yeah.
So for next year, we're projecting just under a $1.1 million increase in property tax collection. Does that sound right to you? And I'm just curious, based on your sort of estimates of economic growth, whether or not we've got the right revenue projection on your end.
Can you indicate which form that you're referring to that on?
He's got his.
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at my own.
Yep. Did you grab one of those from the back?
Okay, let me grab one of those.
Yeah, I get-
Gene's got it.
So for 2026, we've got 133.5 million estimated. It's that top line under the revenue.
It's a $1.1 million increase in revenue based upon total assessed value and growth, and I think what you'd be asking
I just wanted to make sure that passed the smell test for
that
you.
sounds accurate.
minus appeals.
Yeah, and it's always that's always a fluid number depending on the number of appeals we get. We are through that whole period of that exemption review, so you should be receiving more of those requests to refund money. Maybe a couple more stragglers throughout the end of this year, but you won't see any of that next year.
Am I correct that it was something like $58 million added through this year through assessments?
That's correct.
Value added to the tax
Correct.
rolls.
That's additional assessed value, and that is and so we just recertified the tax numbers yesterday at our last appeal meeting, and that was the number that we had calculated from the previous year.
And so that number being added equals roughly 1 point whatever million you're referencing there, Eric.
That was my question.
Okay.
I just want to make sure we have the correct numbers in here. Does that sound right to you? That
I'll double
58
check.
million in added total assessed value would equal about $1 million in increased revenue?
I have to look at that. I don't want to say yes without having time, but I'll send you an email. I'll do the math, but we would just multiply that by the county and library millage rates. So
Thank you.
it's an easy calculation.
I would just throw out there as well for my tax collection days, just keep in mind that adding assessed value to the tax rolls does not always mean that bill gets paid in the current year. So it's not necessarily a one-to-one calculation. Things may have to go through tax claim and get paid a year or two later. So.
And we get a little bit more money with costs and penalties.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been proactive with whenever we have fees that we can charge. Each year we look at those, and it seems to me, from what I recall, the last 2-3 years we've constantly looked at areas where we can add additional costs, additional fees, to just keep that revenue stream. Holly, did you want to mention about the upset sale and the revenue?
Yeah, generally, the upset sale is always held in September, which all this budget work was basically done prior to that. Historically, we sell about 50-some properties at the upset sale. This year, we sold 102. So, which did bring in a lot more of tax money. That being said, so that did increase our fees that we have because we do charge a fee to all of the purchasers of the sale of $400. So that did increase our fees by another.
I think we were at 20,000.
Yeah, approximately $20,000. And that being said, when people purchase a property, the prior owner does have the ability to object to that tax sale. If the judge overrules and invalidates the sale, we still get the tax money because we do not allow them to overturn the sale without the property owner paying that tax. So they still have to pay the tax. We still get the tax money.
Yeah. So
we collected at the upset sale this year. We collected $446,000 in delinquent tax, and then we also collect the 2025 tax, which that was about $195,000. So then that's divided among the county, the municipalities, and the school. But
Thank you,
So
Holly.
based on the increases Holly mentioned, we're showing a projected increase in revenue of 1.89. We probably will be about 1% higher, so closer to 3%.
Good work.
Good job.
Thank you all.
Next up is Controller Mary Baton.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you.
All right. Controllers tab 14 in your binders. Revenue for the current year, we're estimating 8,800 in revenue, which is also over the budget from last year because we launched the new employee card system. Expenses are estimated $86,774 under, or 6.53%. Revenue for next year is estimated at $4,000. Expenses are requested at 1.57 million, an increase of $240,781 or 18.11%. Which I will explain in a minute here. There are merit positions requested, or merit increases requested, for the retirement manager, payroll manager, AP manager, and AP specialist. And they would abolish the AP specialist and the HR generalist position. This would result in a net savings of $132,000 salary costs. The increase in payroll is due to it being moved under the controller's office beginning in 2026. The payroll manager and HR generalist responsible for assisting with payroll would move. The employee in the HR generalist position would transfer to the vacant payroll retirement specialist position that already exists in their office, and the generalist position would be abolished. The large increase in computer software is due to the addition of the debt book and grant tracking software necessary for the ACFR and CFA reporting. The large increase in contracted temp services is due to the addition of the ADP contract for payroll and 1099 printing and reporting.
I just want to underline one thing Chris said there, which is that the increase in payroll that appears here on paper is offset by a corresponding decrease in payroll in the HR department because of the move of 2 positions.
That's what I was going to ask. We moved those positions. So it's just that 18% increase is reflective of those positions. Okay,
But is it?
Yes and no.
Exactly.
Yes.
There's more to this answer.
And just to make mention, and I know it's not in here and it's not in the request that you have seen. Last year when I sat here, I requested to replace the old assistant to the deputy director and make them a tax accountant. And you all agreed to that. We never filled that. You actually removed the funding because at the end of the budget cycle, you removed all funding of vacant positions. I was planning to fill that position this year. I am going to abolish that position as well. So you don't see that as a savings because it wasn't funded in last year's budget, but I am eliminating an additional position that you don't see on this paperwork.
Yeah, your budget's not the one I'm worried about. I'd like to see the correlating reduction in expenses from personnel, because I understand they got a whole plan to use portions of those monies.
I mean, I can tell you the salaries moved. I don't know about a plan to spend those, but the positions have been moved from one to the other.
And the software that I purchased for the ACFR and CFA reporting, that's why I eliminated the additional accounts payable specialist position. That was to offset the cost in that software.
So to answer Commissioner Hartwick's question, yes, where we will need to do the due diligence is on the HR department's side of this equation.
I have no questions. Anybody else?
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary. Next up, prison. Director Bay, Warden Briggs.
Let's make a note to do that.
Yes. Tab 15 of your binder. Revenue is expected under approximately $1 million. Expenses are estimated 2.9 over for 2025. For 2026, the revenue is requested at an increase of $852,000 over 2025, with expenses requested 6.6 million over. There were no new positions or merit increases requested. We have 6,352 for miscellaneous small items and tools that will inevitably need replaced throughout the year. They had 4 additional requests that are not included in the budget. A scissor lift, 55 additional radios, an additional key track storage box, and another vehicle that would be a 5-year lease. So the cost you see here is year 1. The total cost for all of that would be $106,500. Some general notes here. Overtime is estimated at $8.5 million for 2025. The budget for next year is currently set at $6.64 million. Salary expenses were set to $20 million for 2026. These bring the salary and overtime lines more in line with the actual costs seen. As part of the current CBA, holidays are paid at 3.5 times salary, and the policy to pay overtime at 2.5 times that was established as part of the COVID measures has ceased.
Hope it works out.
Overtime is expected to decrease from historical figures due to fewer hospital transports with the new medical provider, shift commander authority to eliminate a post, and a potential housing block closure to reduce staffing needs. The recently vacated admin assistant 1 and file clerk positions have had their funding removed for 2026 as they are not planning on being filled. The maintenance service contract line could be removed for 2026 and paid for using a portion of the bond earmarked for ongoing maintenance projects. I believe this note has expired. The COSAP grant was for the reentry navigators did just recently get renewed for another year. So number 5 they have through next year. And as of yesterday, the new decision from the FCC for the jail fund. So there's an estimated $750,000 in expenses annually that are paid out of there. There is some funding available, I think, still in the fund for a couple months, depending on when this ruling would go into effect. But otherwise, those expenses would shift back to the general fund. Federal inmate reimbursement is estimated approximately $3.8 million for 2026. This is based on an average of 100 federal inmates over the course of 2026. The feds have confirmed the increase in the number of inmates to be housed. There's a potential for a regional solution to transfer to other facilities within the region in order to limit the number of keep separates and protected inmates housed at the prison. They are working to finalize a housing agreement with Franklin County, which, if completed, would result in additional revenue. The global telelink grant that historically we've received ended as a result of the FCC phone tablet ruling. And we have approximately $53,000 included as one-time revenue for forfeited uniform deposits. I do have 2 quick other updates on their budget request. The medical services line, that was calculated as the base amount for Medico when the contract was still being finalized. Since that has an October 1st date and there's a 3% escalator in that base cost is going to be $13,594,733, which is a slight increase. $400,000 in revenue in the is going to be removed from the 340B program. We had put this together. We thought that would be a savings that we would get in the form of a check to be deposited, but that will just offset costs, so that's not going to be appearing in that revenue line. And the jail fund, it's a projected shortage is $373,000 for 2026 based off some calculations Bruce did here in the last day. And just the other note about the medical service contract, we do have the base funding amount there, so should there be any catastrophic claims or really high cost services, those would be billed in addition to that, so that does have that potential to go over.
I just want to start with a couple notes that I think are really important here. First, the 340B program, which will hopefully save us some money on prescription rebates. We're getting into that program a little late into the new year, I believe. I think it's going to be like 3 months in, but hopefully as we get into that program, we're going to see actualized cost savings depending upon utilization of certain meds and work with Medico to ensure that we utilize. So I think given our new provider's cost, I think it's worth noting some other areas in which we're saving. And I think prescription cost is going to be one area where we see rebates back. Like I said, once we get through the first quarter of next year, then we'll begin actualizing those. And I would anticipate, I think it'd be very helpful for the board to, as you guys see those cost savings for it to be communicated, not just with this board, but certainly prison board as well. The other thing I want the public to become aware of is that in October 2024, and I asked for these numbers, thank you for giving me these are very helpful. And I anticipated the numbers would reveal exactly what they reveal here. In October of 2024, we had 4,550 hours of correction officers sitting at the hospital. So I just want to be clear, if we send one inmate to the hospital, 2 COs go. Yes. If we have 2 inmates at the hospital, 4 COs are there. It's times 2 for everything. And that becomes quite the cost burden when I'm looking at, on October 4th of last year, we had 9 inmates at the hospital. That's 18 COs that are at the hospital. So reflective of October 2024, we had 4,550 hours of COs at the hospital. Our new medical provider in 1 month of data, same month, different year, 1,933 hours. That's a significant cost savings month over month. Not to mention, it allows us to apply those resources to the prison, meaning we're not locked down as frequently. And that was the work of this particular agreement with Medico to ensure that the backstop was much more, the risk was on them if they wanted to send someone out, but the cost was on them. So I think previously with the previous provider, if they sent someone out to the hospital, it was $7,500 or something to that effect, $7,500. They covered the first cost. Anything above $7,500, the county incurred the cost. Now with our new provider, the cost is $30,000. So it's significant for them, where someone might, and I'm not inferring that this is the way it was done, but I'm just saying someone might say this particular treatment for this person internally is going to cost us $10,000. Let's just send them to the hospital because then we'll be capped at, in essence, $7,500. Now, there's much more incentive to not send someone to the hospital. And certainly if they need care, they need to be sent to the hospital. But in the sense of as a backstop to the costs that they would have to incur internally. And so I just think that's really important, worth noting, because I know there's a shock value to the cost of the new provider. But I do think we're going to see massive cost shifts when it comes to the hours that we're paying in overtime for people to go, sit at the hospital, because these were overtime hours, a lot of these hours, because for a lot of times, we had to put calls out for extra people, and so I think those are really important, worth noting, not to mention the reality that Medico has a much better track record when it comes to lawsuits and the cost that we incur in the millions on lawsuits and legal representation. So obviously we can get into the budget talks and the ways in which that's, the implications of that. But I just wanted to say we've already seen cost savings in 1 month from just the hospital utilization alone. So thank you for providing this data. This is very helpful. Anyone else?
Yeah, I've got a lot of questions. And none of this really changes without changes in staffing levels. I mean, in staffing levels. I mean, if you still have the same staffing levels that you did when you're sending out, I don't know how many other, how many additional people, it could save us internally money, but unless you adjust your numbers, you're still going to be paying the same salaries. I guess the question would be, if this contract was able to provide those savings, where was that quantified? Because I think we're paying $8 million more in 2025 than we are in 2023. You know what I mean? So we now have $8 million more that's budgeted. Where is that factored into the reduction? And I'd like to see where that's quantified, because it's hard to measure that if that's sort of what we're budgeting. How do you sort of say, okay, and first of all, it's good. I think it's a good thing. Like, it's not a bad thing. But how are you going to quantify that without a backstop or a change in your staffing models and plans? Because I doubt you're going to call less staff out.
You might call less staff out. Let me give you an example. If you're sitting at the end of a shift And what would be a typical staff complement would not address the need for 9 people at the hospital, for example, which would be 18 people. You will put a call out for anybody to come work for overtime, and that might start at 1.5, but it might go to double time, right? If you absolutely need it. And you might also start making determinations about, you know, uh, what it's going to look like to, there's going to be restrictive movement. It's going to be on lockdown if we don't have enough COs. So that, coupled with, I think we started the year maybe at like 50 COs down, and I think we're now at 19 COs down. So we are also building staff, which is also addressing our overtime. At least I don't see how these transition. I will share your concern though that we need a staffing analysis and a model. The challenge is I can't address what was paid for previous to me becoming a commissioner that wasn't actualized, which, Wetzel's report was supposed to include a staffing analysis. It did not. Staffing analyses are expensive. We already have a quote for one, and we don't have the money for that right now. And that's I think the question of, I think we do need a staffing analysis so that we can have a clear target and, clear goals of what it will take to reduce overtime.
But staffing analysis aren't as expensive as the cost I see continuing to rise. I mean,
I agree.
Like, what is the plan in order to reduce staff per shift because you're going to have the reduction in call-offs? I mean, I think this is just not being planned, and that you got contract restrictions, which I still have yet to understand. I asked this in a public meeting. There was a follow-up, but I know we have people that are paid based upon what you had determined as contractual agreements, that if you're working a double shift on a holiday, the prison guard gets not paid for the 2 shifts they work. They get paid 6 times. 6 times for 12 hours.
16.
16 hours. 6 times for 16 hours. I mean, like, that is...
It's mind-blowing.
I just don't understand. I mean, if the public knows you're getting paid 6 times for working that amount, I think we'd have a whole lot more people applying to be a prison guard, because that is, I don't know if there's any place you can find that you're getting paid 6 times for only working 2 shifts. And that's just one example from a staffing perspective of things that need to be modeled out. And while I think we have a backstop, I don't understand, at least it's not been clearly communicated to me, is where is the reduction in staff happening? And I mentioned a couple of things. Talked about the reduction in the number of inmates, but there's room in Lancaster. There's room in Cumberland. I heard you saying this about conflicts and how they're going to be moving out, but how, again, will that change staffing models? Like, I've got to see that's quantified, that if we have all of these less one-on-one separations, there's got to be a reduction in the overall complement, because I don't see that translating into savings, at least not as it relates to these projections and numbers. So we're kind of shooting in the dark with all these kind of ideas without a clear staffing model pattern adjustment that's going to reduce the total number of people to meet the state correctional requirements for what is required per inmate per guard. And again, I'm not the expert here, but that is what is really driving these costs. I mean, the healthcare contract's $8 million more. If we're going to talk about savings, I'd like to see how that's going to be quantified, because I'm all for this. I mean, I think it's a great concept, but I don't know how without changing the staffing levels, you don't quantify the savings. Just because they're not sending people out, you're not sending as many guards out, but you're still going to have potentially the same number of guards per shift, despite whether they're being sent out or not, unless you do, 2 people that you're calling out, or 4. I mean, tell me how that works. Let's just say we're under the old model in this example. We're under the old model where we've got, we'll take October 1st as an example. You got 7 inmates out, right? On top of your current complement that's out there at the prison now, how do you handle 7 inmates? Do you plan for that?
Well,
Or do you call people out based upon the number of people that are in the hospitals? I don't know that.
So just to qualify this data,
Can you use the
number of-
microphone? I just want to make sure people online can hear you.
Just to qualify this data. Is it on? To qualify this data, the number of inmates in that first column is actually the number of inmates at the hospital that day. So
That's what I mean.
Okay, so
you got 7
hold-
that day. You need 2 for each inmate.
No,
it's
hold on, let me
14 staff.
finish. So some of these numbers include people who went to the hospital maybe for a few hours and came back. So this doesn't represent people who were necessarily
There all
overnight
day,
at the
overnight.
yeah. So that has to be factored in. But to your point, there's no way we could project the number of people going out to the hospital for overnight stays. But if the shift commander at the beginning of his or her shift notes that there are people at the hospital and then they have to be relieved, right? So we have to send people out to relieve the two. Let's just say there's the 7. Let's just say that they're overnight inmates and that we have 14 officers at the hospital. They have to be relieved. So we have to send people out to relieve them.
But just give me an example. Let's say, do you have like a pool of officers that you have available just to send to the hospital?
So what happens is
Like, I don't understand, because if you have 1, or if you got a need for 14, you got a need for 2, you still have the same staffing levels.
so they go into roll call, they sign up if they want overtime for the next shift. Plus, we have what's called a street list. So if somebody's off and wants to work a shift, they call into the shift commander's office. So we have.
They want to work a shift.
Correct. They
Not
wanna
if they're
work
needed.
overtime. Well, yes, both, because then when we need the overtime slots, we go down the list to fill by officer and seniority, and back-to-back overtimes. There's a big
A list of people that want to get in.
yeah, there's some, and then there's some days that we don't fill all the overtime too. So yeah, a couple different things that you were mentioning. I know the 6 times seems it is a lot, but officers being home from a family on a Christmas, I don't think there's an amount of money we can put on that. I would rather be home, so I want to keep the human element involved in that. But to answer your question, it's only going to save on the overtime. It's not going to save you on the personnel costs per se.
Can I ask you guys?
Just don't understand.
So I think a lot of the things that have been brought up so far are forward-looking things that we could change, whether it's more efficient transport to the hospital or fewer transports to the hospital, for example, correcting some items in collective bargaining agreements, for example. But all of those have been constant over the last few years. So I guess I would be curious to hear from your perspective. Why do you think it cost $8 million more to run the prison this year than it did in 2023, given that all of the things we've described have been
For a long
constant?
So
Like what's changed in the last 2 years?
Well, if I could refer you to this document here with the graph on it, we did an
One's
analysis.
that right here, this one?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then it's in written form too. So what really escalated our overtime up until the beginning of 2025 was this double time and a half if you worked a particular overtime shift. And that was a result of COVID. That was a COVID incentive. So we cut that out at the beginning of this year. And so this shows that we've saved, there's some savings here. If you look at the third quarter of 2024 versus the third quarter of 2025, we were able to reduce that number significantly. That's for the double time and a half. And just for the regular overtime analysis, we did the same thing and compared 2024, the first 3 quarters versus the first 3 quarters of 2025. And you can see that there's a cost savings there as well. So, with the amount of officers coming in with the new hires, it reduces the overtime cost. You'll see that the hours for overtime may be a little bit higher, but the dollars are lower because of the lower pay of the newer officers.
Is there a world where and I just want to ask this, if we get to a full complement, let's just say by the new year, we are at 0 for openings. We have every CO officer filled. Are we still mandating overtime?
Yeah, we'll
Why?
still need some.
So that's not a full complement then at 0. No, I'm not saying overtime because someone's on vacation. I'm saying right now every officer has to do 3 overtimes in a pay period. That's just mandated across the board. Does not matter what your seniority is, does not matter where you're at. Everyone has to do 3. If we're fully, I don't want to say full complement because I don't know that it actually reflects a full complement. I'm saying if the amount of openings we have for correction officers, everyone is filled, are we lifting the mandatory 3 overtimes? Or are they holding at 3 mandatory overtimes for everybody? Or
So the contract states if you volunteer for 3, you can't get drafted. So they volunteer for 3, or you get drafted. So to answer your question, some people don't volunteer and they just get drafted, and it could be, and there's so many different.
They can get drafted, but you draft them. So I guess what I'm saying, right? Is that correct?
So we draft them if we need.
Well, we stop drafting people if we are at 0.
I hate to predict that,
but that's
we
0.
could
So I just want to be clear what the number of openings we currently have that we've kind of been saying, look, we're 19 away from the number. That number we don't see as an accurate staffing complement, because basically what you just told me is I can't guarantee that we're not going to need overtime. So that number is outdated in itself of how many correction officers we need to complement Dauphin County Prison, because it might be exactly where we want to be, and we're just going to have to pay overtime. Like, probably every prison pays a certain amount of overtime. But if we're working it into the model, I just don't know how I feel about that. I would like it to be that a correction officer could work out there and never have to work overtime because we have a staffing complement. But if you want to work overtime, it's available because this person's on vacation this week, or this is happening, or that's happening, or we have more people out at the hospital this week than we had last week. And, there's reasons if someone wants to pick up overtime and they want to be out there 80 hours a week, they can be out there. But there's also a reason that if someone wants to have a work-life balance, it's possible, because right now 3 overtime shifts over the course of a 2-week period of time, that's very challenging to have a work-life balance. So, but you're telling me that if we get to 0, like, we're not really at 0.
Yeah, and to answer Eric's question and your question, the 231 number, which is 231 counting sergeants, line staff, has been in effect since I've been here, and that was when we took over the judicial center, and we never increased staffing, and that's 4 officers per shift down there, so 12 officers they were counting too. So I think factoring that in on top of it, yes.
So if you factored in the judicial center over top of the 0, we could potentially be at a place,
I would say yes,
where
Well, you will still always have overtime for
you'll always have
holidays,
overtime.
and
I'm not opposed to always having overtime. I'm opposed to having mandated overtime, because right now every correction officer, we have 200 correction officers right now,
roughly.
Yeah.
Yep.
All 200 work 3 overtime shifts every 2 weeks. That's an explicit amount of overtime.
Yeah.
That, like, I don't. If we get to 0, I don't want to see that level of overtime. I think we need to reconsider our approach on mandated overtime for that nature. And I don't know what, I want to be clear, I don't know what union obligations we have and overtime provisions and that kind of stuff. Like, I don't want to get into the contract of that. I'm just more saying, when I look at the cost that we have, those overtime costs are so significant. And I understand the holiday pay overtime. I'm less concerned about that and more concerned with just the consistent grind of mandated overtime when we potentially might not need that complement of correction officers. Now, I could be wrong, because we don't have a staffing analysis to reference to be able to show exactly what we need, the exact amount. And so I want to be informed. I want data to kind of drive our decisions here. But I guess my other question you made a statement that, Commissioner Hartwig, that it's cheaper to have a staffing analysis than to keep paying this amount of money. I know we've been holding out for state dollars that we're going to help fund a staffing analysis, and we're going to go back to the state and ask for that. Obviously, the state can't even give us the money it's required to give us right now, let alone extra. Should we work into this budget a staffing analysis for the purpose of cost savings, or at the very least, a roadmap to what it looks like to get to cost savings with staffing. I don't know if 2026 should reflect that, given that like we're probably going to be back here next year complaining about not having a staffing analysis if we wait on the state. And I'm concerned about what revenue might be lost in that period of time.
My only response would be, what are your plans to be able to cut costs and to reduce the actual salary and benefits line item of the president?
I think I won't even say anecdotally that we do need a staffing analysis. As the warden just mentioned, that some of the staffing matrix that's in place now was in place before he got here. So clearly it's outdated. Our numbers.
Can you work with your attorney to change that staffing matrix? I mean,
yeah, we can. I mean, the reality is we couldn't get to the 231 number for however many years anyway, so it didn't matter how high that was up until this point.
Yeah.
If we're in a better spot 2026 and that needs adjusted, does that make sense? We were always hovering below 200 anyway, so it didn't really matter what the full complement number was.
Are we over state Department of Correction standards or requirements for inmates to guards?
Yes.
Why?
So we do a staffing analysis for the DOC inspection, and we meet the criteria for that. But another point for Eric, the MAT, we have a lot more stuff going on than we did 5 years ago, trying to meet mandates as it relates to litigation purposes too. So we need a deep dive into it. I'm not going to argue with you on that.
Again,
and even the times we're doing med passes, and I mean they're doing a lot, and it needs more structure.
Again, I don't know what to talk about related to the budget because I don't know what the plans are to cut personnel costs. So I couldn't say what would we fund or not fund. What are the initiatives to cut costs? Without a kind of game plan. I mean, I feel frustrated in saying that I'd prefer to send half the inmates to open spaces in other locations to be able to then cut costs by what would be the minimum mandatory required inmates to guard ratio. I mean, again, we're down 500 inmates from years ago. I mean, I know we had day rooms and everything free. I just don't know I'm not hearing any creative solutions related to cutting staffing costs or transferring prisoners out. I mean, there's always this issue of gang members and one-to-ones and all of these things that are going, it's a hodgepodge of things. There needs to be, if there's a gang member at 101 that's going to require additional staffing, I got this plan. If there is, overtime issues, I got this plan. If there are reductions in sort of medical requirements, we're not only calling these folks out. I don't know how that works on your both what the collective bargaining agreement allows you to do and what you can be doing to make sure that the folks are safe and we're meeting our minimum mandated requirements.
Yeah, I guess to answer your question, once we were asked to sharpen our pencils, we tried to balance. We did cut a couple spots, one from admin, one from treatment. Tried to cut out some training. Admin was involved, so we tried to balance out the cuts we made after you asked for cuts. Sending an inmate to Cumberland County sounds easy, but then who's transporting them to court, and the sheriffs are going to go get them, and then you're going to accrue
It's technology,
costs.
right?
Yeah, I get it. I'm just saying, I think it sounds easier said than done. And I don't want to make
It's
an excuse
different.
for it.
Here's the thing: it's different in the way you currently do business.
Right.
But we've got to have a game plan to be able to reduce the overall cost of staffing. And if there's not requirements to meet that in there, and I don't know why we continue to do the same thing.
Yeah, I get it.
No, but yes.
Of the 56 positions that are listed as vacant, looking back to March of 2020, are all 56
That list is accurate as of the 9/17 personnel pack. So they're, yes. Now that was voted on September 23rd, but that's the point at which I had to cut it off to get you guys budget books so you had time to review. So there may have been a few changes since then.
Unless
And-
is it mandated by union? Oh, it's non-union. Okay.
Do we have that? What are you looking at, sir?
There is, without seeing what exactly you're looking at, there are some vacancies which remain on the books from an HR complement standpoint, but are not actually budgeted for. I don't know why that is, but we intend over the next few weeks to bring you, for salary board purposes, a list of, I think, dozens of positions to correct that.
Of being able to productively put forth a budget hearing, we should have correct information in front of us as soon as yesterday meeting.
Agreed.
I'm asking questions that they can't answer because this information in front of me is not entirely accurate.
You're right. Yep.
That's a whole other story. So I can't even go down that road. But of these 56, I see a here that works there, which you're going to look into for me, which is not listed in here. So, when Mr. Wetzel was here, he gave us a year of history, provided a lot of information to us. His number one request.
Your mic's not working, I don't think.
When Mr. Wetzel was here, his number one request was that we hire an internal affairs investigator, which we did. We're now 2 years into that. Do you feel that, and I'm not saying I'm supporting any new positions at all anywhere in the county, but do you feel with things that are going on out there and constantly hear about smoke, inmates are smoking substances, which is a catastrophic health concern. It's happened multiple times, continues to happen. I've heard of inmate on inmate assaults, inmate staff assaults. Is one internal affairs investigator enough for that prison at this time?
No. No.
Why isn't that a request then?
Well, that's a good question. That is, I know the oversight and I had conversations about internal affairs. Provided some data to show that to date, well, up to that date, that individual has completed about 155 investigations inside the prison. He's been instrumental in reducing shanks and drugs and K2. In fact, we just had a conversation on our way down here about an investigation that he's collaborating with CID.
If we're going to have discussions about a specific individual or active investigations, I would recommend we.
No, I'm not going to.
Okay.
My thing is, do we need another internal affairs investigator or another staff?
The short answer is that with the budget constraints that were relayed to us, I mean, how could I ask for another investigator when we're on a hiring freeze?
No, you could say I have 56 positions that are vacant. We'll eliminate 10 of them. And oh, by the way, I'd like a new internal affairs investigator.
I'd like to see that document.
Okay, well, is there a reason why they don't
It's
have
assuming the document's accurate, which we just kind of said it's not, right?
I think you have the same thing I have.
I do. I'm saying, I think the accuracy of the document just brought into question whether these are HR carryover things that aren't actually in the budget.
Irregardless of whether we're in a budget constraint or not, you're the director of the Dauphin County Prison.
Yes, sir.
If you feel, from talking to staff, the board, etc., that there's a position out there that is as critical as that one at this time, you shouldn't even think twice about having to at least ask for it, because what are you going to do, say no? If you don't ask for it and you need it, then what else do you need out there you're not asking for?
Fair enough. Fair enough.
These are very serious times at Dauphin County Prison.
Yes, sir.
And if there are things that are required out there to get us to a better place, then if you don't ask for it, then you got to look in the mirror and ask yourself why you're not asking.
Yep, fair enough.
And Commissioner Priest, I'm hearing there is willing to support a tax increase to ensure that we can make that happen. So that's all my questions. Anybody else?
My only final comment is I'm not prepared to support or sort of adopt any form of budget. I've not really heard a game plan.
Right.
So I just need to understand what those plans are before we adopt the formal budget.
And I'm going to assume that that comment by Commissioner Douglas was tongue-in-cheek, because it's completely inappropriate as we talk about the prison and the outrageous.
We asked
cost
every
overages.
department to go through and cut what they proposed, and now you're asking why an additional staff wasn't provided when we have clear cuts across the board. Like he said, we've talked about having to do layoffs in the county. I don't think this is a time where it would be appropriate for any director to come unless it's absolutely urgent. We can always use another, I'm sure, investigator. We can always use another sergeant. You've cut admin. I'm just trying to say I don't think it's realistic unless we're all in support of a tax increase, which I think we're doing everything we can to avoid, for us to nitpick over whether or not there
I'm
should
not
have been
nitpicking
more.
over anything. I just said, is there anything you need out there? And I think that's a legitimate question to ask of a
We need
director.
cost savings. That's what we're.
But I'm not asking you. I'm asking the individual that's running the facility. You're the oversight and prison board chairman. I haven't heard any suggestions.
I don't think
on-
we need another IA right now, but we're differing on that position.
I didn't ask you.
I understand. Anyone else for any other comments? Hearing none, thank you. We'll now open it to public comment. 3-minute time cap. You'll need to. We are being live streamed, and you'll need to share your name prior to beginning. Anyone for public comment?
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Haggerty, Pamela Parson, City of Harrisburg. I would just like to remind you that budgets are moral documents. And what I mean by that is that the choices that we make and where we spend our money says what's important. And so we need to look at that as you look at a budget, and as you take your fiduciary responsibility for the county seriously. I would also, I kind of felt like maybe like Commissioner Hartwick did a little bit earlier today, my head in my hand. I mean, you were facing serious issues, and this is not going to be easy. I would ask you to remember that behind this, there are people. All of these dollars, we're talking about people. We're talking about people's jobs. We're talking about services. That behind all this are people who feel, who will be affected in real ways. I would also encourage you not to run after the little shiny things that appear like they will give us quick infusions of cash, like TMI, like data centers, because often those things that look really nice and shiny, sometimes after the shininess peels off, there's costs under there that we didn't consider. And again, costs to people. And we don't really understand yet what the full impacts on our environment that data centers will bring to us in terms of heat, in terms of water usage, in terms of property values. All of those things are still unknown. When we talk about TMI, we've been through this once, and the costs were high to the people who lived here. And I can say this because my mother was working at Hershey Medical Center at the time, and she was involved in planning to move people during the accident. My father worked at TMI for almost a year after the accident, laying phone lines back when we had phones that worked on actual lines. There were real costs in terms of health. My father died in 1987 from lung cancer, and everybody who worked with him at the island died of various cancers after the accident. I know there are the naysayers out there who say, no, that didn't happen, but there were real consequences to that accident, ones that I don't think you're going to be able to cover with $90,000 for a hazardous materials manager. I'm just saying to think about these things. I also think that it makes a lot of sense to look at reimbursement rates when we as a county do things for other people, like Dairy Township. Do we look at that when we're dealing with the Great American Outdoor Show with the NRA? Is there a consistency with how we as a county get reimbursed by the many folks who use us, from folks who are putting on events to other municipalities? I mean, it's great that we can provide this service, but we need to look at how that money comes in. And here I am, the only person here, but I appreciate that this is being live streamed and that I have the opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Moved by Commissioner Hartwick. I'll second. All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.